you so much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I went to Mbarara University, but I don't know how I know the Makerere anthem. Somehow you must learn the Makerere anthem, right? A round of applause for the Makerere MDD, ladies and gentlemen. Our dear chief guest, as I invite my co-host, Jason, to come, I would like to recognize our development partners, Mr. Mark Troit from the French Development Agency. Thank you so much for joining us. Ms. Verena Maria Fritz from the World Bank. Thank you so much. Yeah. Ms. Fiona Davis from the World Bank. Mr. Aya Gwath from AFD. Is he here? Oh, yeah. Oh, is she here? So sorry. Ms. Agnes Kaiser from the DPP's office. We're going to do more recognitions much later, but I would now like to invite Jason to please come and invite the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Makerere oye. Makerere oye. Thank you, the MDD team, for skillfully executing your task. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the man I'm about to invite is the architect and engineer of PIMS. And please mark those words, the architect and engineer. That means he started this and is also very pivotal in its implementation. He is responsible for steering PIMS reforms right from 2015, 2016 up to date, and this will be definitely pronounced during the course of the program. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Director Budget, Mr. Ashaba Hannington. And as he takes to the floor, another hand clap, please. And sir, when you're done delivering your remarks, you will in turn invite the PSST. Thank you.
The Honorable Minister for Finance, Planning and Economic Development, in charge of planning, Honorable Amos Rugolovi. Our chief guest, Dr. Donald Kaberuka, the former Minister of Finance, the Republic of Rwanda, but also the 7th President of the African Development Bank. The Permanent Secretary, Secretary Treasury, and your fellow permanent secretaries, development partners have been recognized. The Vice Chancellor of Makerere University, represented by DVC, was here. Representatives from academia and private sector who are here and variously introduced earlier on. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as the Master of Ceremony has indicated, mine is to give just a brief context. In the interest of time, I will be extremely brief. But it's my honor and pleasure to welcome you all as the co-host of this investment conference, together with our colleagues from Makerere University, represented by Professor Buyinza, but also the team includes Professor Hisari, Professor Bale, and their team. We welcome you to our second Public Investment Management Conference. And the theme for this year's conference, as the previous speaker indicated, is overcoming implementation barriers in public investment management for fiscal sustainability. This theme is deliberate and it is timely. It is timely because it comes at a critical time in Uganda's development journey, a time when the 4th National Development Plan is in its first year of implementation, a time when the country has set an ambitious guarantees efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability of projects. So we must do business unusual. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me just mention 3 things which are significant in our journey for public investment management in the country. We've done a lot in the last 10 years. And many of them are known to you, including automation of public investment management system with the introduction of integrated bank of projects, building institutions, the development committee, among other things we've done. But what is significant now is that recently the cabinet approved a national public investment management policy of 2025. Now this policy provides a unified framework to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of public investments across the entire investment cycle. There is now clarity on
Amanya n'eddoboozi ni Pastor Isaac Kyobe ekiweweesa okuva mu Kansanga Miracle Center Church. Njagala okutwala omukisa guno okubaaniriza abantu bonna ab'omu kibuga Kampala bakolera mu Kampala. Twaweebwa omukisa ogw'okukeera buli makya otandike ne Katonda, ekibuga tekisobola kulema. So tulina okuviira ddala ku ssaawa 12 okutuukira ddala ssaawa 2:15 Monday to Friday ku Kampala Road ku House of Rest edda yayitibwanga Fidodido. Tosubwa oluna ate ne tukomawo ku ssaawa 6 okutuukira ddala ku ssaawa 8:30 Monday to Friday ku Kampala Road. So njagala kutwala mukisa guno kuyamba na kujjukiza nti engeri yokka gy'osobola okukikola mu kibuga Kampala, kubanga ebyandikwa ebitukuvu bigamba nti si lwa maanyi, si lwa buyinza, naye olw'omwoyo wa Katonda. Jangu tutandike ne Mukama ku ssaawa z'amalya g'ekyemisana, jangu tubeere naawe, jangu tulaba obulungi bwa Mukama mu nsi eno ey'abalamu. Tosobola kulemererwa. Abantu mbalabye nga Mukama abayamba, nga Mukama abanyweza, nga Mukama abawa amaanyi, nga Mukama abawa okuwangula. Bayibuli yogera mu Yeremiya essula ya 33 olunyiriri lwa 3 timpita nange ndikuyitaba nenkulaga ebikulu ebinene by'otomanyi. So jangu tubeere ffenna, jangu tukuŋŋaane ffenna, jangu oweebwa omukisa, jangu onoolaba obulungi bwa Mukama mu nsi eno ey'abalamu. Sigadde ndi Pastor Kiweweesi okuva mu Kansanga Miracle Center Isaac Kyobe. Jangu tubeere ffenna, tosubwa amakya, tosubwa misana, Mukama akuwa.
Must be executed on time for good quality to ensure that they not only generate the necessary growth we need given our 10-fold growth targets, but also they create fiscal space for new projects to come in. With these remarks, allow me with great honor to invite the Permanent Secretary, Secretary Treasury, to address you. I thank you and God bless you.
The Honorable Minister of State for Planning, representing the Honorable Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Dr. Donald Kaberuka, our esteemed keynote speaker, my colleagues, the permanent secretaries of the different ministries, our development partners present from the different organizations that we work with to develop Uganda, senior government officials who are present. There are several EDs of agencies and other senior government officials, our hosts of Makerere, Professor, and all my teachers. They are here. I went to school in this, taught by a lot of them. They are here. And my colleagues, I went with to school here. I'm very happy always to come back to Makerere University. Our partners also from civil society, I saw a number of our colleagues we work with to improve projects and other activities we do in the government, but also the private sector with whom we work to develop the country. All of you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you. This is the second time we are here. Always an honor to come and have conversations around the public investment management. And I commend our partners we work with, the Makerere University, particularly the College of Business and Management Sciences here, Professor Isali, Professor Bale, and the other colleagues with whom we are working to improve PIMS. I would like to also extend a special welcome to our keynote speaker, Professor Donald Kaberuka. Professor Kaberuka has extensive experience in both project financing during his tenure at the African Development Bank, but also in project implementation as a former Minister of Finance for the Republic of Rwanda. We are looking forward to your invaluable input and experience to enable us improve our project implementation frameworks. As a country, we have embarked on a very beautiful journey. Some people call it ambitious. I call it beautiful. A beautiful journey of growing our economy tenfold. We want Ugandan economy to become a $500 billion economy in our generation by 2040. And we are putting a lot of emphasis on the 4 areas we summarize as the ATMs: agro-industrialization, tourism, mineral beneficiation, including oil and gas, but also science, technology, and innovation, including digital transformation. But also the enablers. We have enabler areas we are prioritizing, including security. Of course, we cannot take security for granted in this country and this region. Then we have infrastructure, the roads and bridges, the railways, but electricity as well, irrigation infrastructure. We have human capital development, education and health, but also infrastructure and industrial parks, among others, those we call enablers. And this is where the PIMS is mainly very critical in ensuring that we implement them, as the DB has said, within budget, within time, but also with a good quality. We have made commendable progress in strengthening our PIMS, right from preparation and appraisal mechanisms. However, we need to confront one key challenge, and that is the weaknesses we are still experiencing in implementation, project implementation and project management. Across the ministries, departments, agencies, and local governments, we continue to experience persistent delays, having cost overruns, fragmented coordination, but also suboptimal delivery of these projects. These bottlenecks are eroding public trust, but also slowing the pace at which we are developing. And as I've already told you, we are now having no patience at all because we want to have our economy flourish. Therefore, I wish to underscore the point which has been made by the Director Budget. Improving implementation and management of public projects is now our priority number one. Designing a good project is no longer enough. We must ensure that these projects are executed. And we want to execute them within time and budget. We must ensure that we shift our mindset towards accountability, performance-driven leadership, and a culture of delivery of all levels, at all levels of government, of these development projects. And this successful implementation also requires institutional collaboration and delivery capacity. Fiscal space is constrained, as we all know, and the returns on investment must be maximized. This means that the institutions must work seamlessly together across programs and also at different levels of government, but also with the role of private sector enhanced. The private sector has a better incentive to ensure that as we deliver projects, they are on time, they are within the budget, because unlike us in the government, private sector looks for profit, and you can't make money, you can't make profit when you are not within certain parameters of cost management. Therefore, I implore all of us to see how we can leverage the private sector strength to improve on project implementation. We are having a national public investment management policy now. We are having it, and that's a good beginning. It provides a unified framework in which we can manage our entire investment cycle, right from planning and appraisal through implementation, but also the post-implementation evaluation. The policy requires clearly how we can improve our institutional processes, roles, but also performance benchmarks aimed at enhancing efficiency, transparency, and value for money in public investments. And this framework is strengthened by what we call the framework for tracking implementation and performance of public investments in Uganda, which provides tools and mechanisms necessary for real-time monitoring, performance assessment, and timely collective action across the public investment portfolio. It is now incumbent upon all MDAs to institutionalize our PIMS policy provisions, align investments with the sector priorities, and reinforce compliance through stronger internal systems. The benefits of this reform will be realized when we commit to fully scale up our implementation and adapt it not as a formality, but as a transformative tool to improve our service delivery. As I conclude, I would like us to recognize our partners who are helping us in improving our PIMS, the academia, as I already mentioned, particularly Makerere University here, our development partners we work with. When I see in the audience here, I see a lot of faces I sit with, and all of the hard questions we usually ask ourselves, and the tough answers we must get. The private sector, the banks are here. My good friend Sanjay and others, we're always discussing these issues. We have the civil society. There's a man there called Julius Mukunda. He's synonymous with the reform, and he's always asking tough questions, and we are working together to improve. So we are really heartily very grateful for your invaluable input in our improvement of the PIMS process. This conference, therefore, provides us all an opportunity to recommit ourselves to the principles of sound public investment. Let us reflect honestly on what is not working. We learn from each other's experience, because there are those who are doing well. There are some who are implementing projects very well within government, same environment. We need to learn lessons from there as well, and I hope they will be able to share those experiences, but also generate practical solutions. I expect, Director, a report of practical solutions, actionable kind of solutions we can put forward for us to implement our projects. And together we can create a very robust public investment ecosystem. I therefore thank you for your attention, and I wish you very good deliberations. I will take the honor to invite our keynote speaker, Dr. Donald Kaberuka. Kaberuka doesn't need an introduction. If you don't know Don, I think you shouldn't be in the room. This is PIMS. This is how we get efficacy, but they can reflect his profile as he comes. Prof, you're welcome.
Hello, good morning. Now, two things I want to say at the beginning. As we are at Makerere, I want to be sure that my profile is not misleading, because the PS described me as Professor Kaberuka. I have to say that I've never been a professor in all my life, and I think at this stage I'm unlikely to become one. But thank you nonetheless for your kind words. Second, this is a story I was told by Kofi Annan, the late Kofi Annan, because you said I don't need introduction. So the way he puts it, he was walking down the park with his wife in, I think, northern part of Sweden, and they passed through kids over a weekend, and the kids said to their moms, "Mom, we have to take a picture with this guy." So all the kids rushed to take a picture with Kofi Annan. And then the moms asked, "But who is this guy?" The kids said, "Mom, where have you been? This is Morgan Freeman." So I might need an introduction, sir. But thank you nonetheless. Thank you to the Minister of Finance, thanks Makerere, for inviting me to this important subject. Now, in the interest of time, I know there'll be a lot of expertise. I have just a couple of points I want to share with you. Africa faces many challenges, many priorities. Everything is a priority. So we have a tendency to think that all we need is to spend more money. Now, I want to tell you that the story of development in the last 70 years has gone through the following cycles. The first cycle is that all Africa needs is more resources. There was a resource gap. This is how the aid industry was born. Just get more resources. Up to now, we still think that way. Get more resources from domestic taxes, donors, borrowing. Just get more resources. So there's still a lot of thing around the resource gap. Now the resource gap is important to address. I'll come to it. But around the late 1970s, people found that countries perform differently irrespective of the level of resources. There are some countries where huge amounts of resources were being spent, but the development outcomes were quite disappointing. And there were other countries where a lower quantum of resources was spent, but the development outcomes was much more impressive. And so, people ask the question, what is it? And I'll come to it. And I want to link this, my friends here in the room. You know, I don't like bright lights, so I'm having a challenge with brass from that side. Is what happened during the COVID crisis. Something extraordinary happened. And at the time I was chair of the Global Fund for AIDS, Malaria and Tuberculosis in Geneva. And we were trying to see how much money we would give to countries to help them with COVID response. And so went through a whole range of things, what to do. Now something extraordinary happened. There are a number of countries whose spending per capita is quite high, across and even in the health sector. But they did extremely poorly on COVID outcomes. An example is Italy. Italy, especially the northern part of Italy, which is the richest part of Italy, the COVID outcomes were very poor. Now, there are many explanations I want to simplify, including demographics, age of the population, and the rest of it. But the northern part of Italy did very badly on COVID outcomes. In contrast, South Korea, Vietnam, my own country, outcomes on COVID were reasonably good at lower levels of spend. So it turns out it's not simply how much you spend. There are many other questions you have to ask. And in this case of COVID response, it is what is known as social capital. Social capital, on whom you spend, not simply how much you spend, right? And the rest of it. I'll come to that. So from the resource gap, around the end of the 1970s, we moved to another gap. It was called the policy gap. So the issue was, it's not simply about the resources and how much you spend, but what is the policy framework in which you spend? And so I want to urge you, sir, to think about this issue, because you have framed this meeting as the implementation. You'll have to step back a bit and go through this circle of reasoning. So we come to the policy gap. The issue is, but which policies? I think the mistake which was made, including by my friends in the Bretton Woods institutions, I'm sure some of them are here, please, you can quote me on this, because I'm on record already. There was a naive view that the only policies which can work are neoliberal policies. In other words, policies which assume that the private sector and the public sector are opposite entities, and all you have to do is get the public sector out of the way, and the markets will deliver. It turned out, years later, that that is not actually as simplistic as that. What we need is effective states, states that function, that are effective, and markets that are efficient. So instead of framing the problem as it is effective states and efficient markets, the policy was framed as get the state out of the way and the markets to provide the response. Well intended, but fairly naive. That was welcome. So we went through a whole range of policies. Yes, we need policies. But which policies? Whose policies? And here in Africa, we made many mistakes around that issue. P.S., again, I don't want to be misunderstood. There are countries, for example, I know, which had very strong cooperative movements, which were then got rid of because it was assumed the private markets would deliver. There are some countries which had very effective state-owned enterprises, as they had some other very bad state enterprises. So instead of improving on the well-run state enterprises, pending the time when the markets can take over, the issue is narrowly defined as get rid of the state enterprises, forgetting that in some countries, market failure was the reason for state enterprises. So again, there was this duality, overreach, overcorrection. Anyway, I move on. So around the late 80s, now the argument was, no, it's not just resources and policies. There is another gap. Guess what it was? It was called the capacity gap. No, resources we need. I've mentioned my view about resources. And then policies, yes, they have to be right and flexible and adjustable. Now the issue is, no, it is the capacity gap. Implementation, execution, what we're discussing today. This is what I'm saying, you have to step back a bit, not simply discuss how to do things, to do them well. There is a whole range of things to discuss. You know, there is a famous American president, Dwight Eisenhower. If there are Americans in this room and I misquote him, please forgive me. General Eisenhower was a famous general during World War II, commander of NATO, two-term president of the US. And he had a famous saying, very famous, which PS you may want to take note of. He said, planning is useless. This is an American general, president of the US. Planning is useless, worthless. It's something to that effect. They still teach that in the military academies. But then he added, but the planning is absolutely necessary. All right? He said, planning is useless, but planning is absolutely necessary. Then he added, no battle is ever won according to the plan. But then he added, but no battle can be won without a plan. I want you to reflect on this, because you might be tempted to discuss implementation, but forgetting what I've just said. The reason President Eisenhower was saying this, you did a plan, but the context around you is changing all the time. He was talking about it in military terms, because your plan, the enemy also has a plan. The moment you come into contact with the enemy, your plans have to be revised. In our case, what is the enemy? The enemy is the contextual environment, geopolitics, like all the stuff we're facing now, pandemics. So your plan is important, but that plan, unless it's adjusted all the time, no sooner you're going to run into your cost overrun, time overrun, and you'll think, oh, this is a problem of implementation. Actually, it isn't. It is something else. Anyway, then we went to another gap. So it was the resource gap, policy gap, capacity gap. Now another gap. It was called the governance gap. Have you heard about that? Oh, it's all about governance. Only we've had good governance. But what is governance? Who's governance? Who is involved in defining the parameter of the governance? Does it mean that our countries have to resemble Denmark? If there is a Danish person in this room, please forgive me. I'm only picking you as an example because you're my friends. Governance is contextual, very contextual. And if you look around the world today, countries have reached where they are by coming from different historical perspectives, different angles to where they are. And then we can discuss this. And finally, now there's a new lexicon. It is institutions. Oh, things are wrong because our institutions need fixing. So my friends, the reason I'm saying all this is that you cannot discuss implementation in isolation. It is not a how issue. It is not a technical issue. It is a very contextual issue. For example, a country might choose that for where we are at this point in time, there are some important strategic investments I have to make. Say South Korea in shipbuilding in the 60s. You know very well that there would be a lot of frictions there. That many things have to be done. Now, there is a very important concept in economics, please. I don't want to get too technical here. They call it the incremental capital output ratio. Those of you who are interested in economics. How many units of capital you need to get an additional unit of output? The higher it is, the poorer your economy is functioning. Here in Uganda, PS, I think is probably the same as many African countries. You'd be around 3.2, stuff like that. 3.6. Okay, 3.6. That's fair average for sub-Saharan Africa. So an economy to become more efficient, you want to bring that number down as much as you can. But there might be a time when you say, there's some strategic investments I want to make, deliberately, because you have calculated that maybe the economics might be right at the beginning, but in the long run, this is something you want to achieve to transform your economy. Now, as long as the other things I have mentioned around it are fine, there might be a price to pay at the beginning, but huge returns at the end. A railway, for example. We can argue about the economics of railway building. But I do not know of any country in the world which has transformed itself without making those kind of strategic investment at the beginning. Now you have to do them well. That we can discuss. But at the same time, you have to avoid a phenomenon of stranded assets, which in common parlance is known as white elephants. i.e. starting things at very high cost and abandoning them halfway. All right? Stranded assets. I can come to that. So I'm saying this to try to frame, to contextualize your conversation. And I want to go to my second point, a general 4 point to make. In business schools, there is something they teach, which I'm sure, this is a business school, right? So I'm sure the dean will know this. They say a good policy is like a triangle. A triangle. So the first thing, you must get it right, is that it must be technically sound. A good policy must be technically sound. Do you have to get bright people like those in this room? You can get consultants from consulting companies, and then you get your policies as technically sound as you can. That is not very difficult, contrary to what most people think. It is very, very easy to get bright people, do spreadsheets, add up the numbers, optimize, and you'll get it. That's not difficult. But the second thing you must get right, I'm sure PS you have faced this in your career, is that it must be politically feasible. It must be politically feasible. It might be technically sound. You score it A+ at the business school. But then you have to go to the next level, test its political feasibility. Now, when I say political feasibility, I don't mean politics political. Is it affordable? Is the sequencing right? Is the timing right? Do you have enough coalitions around it? Are all interest groups catered off? Are the trade-offs done? If it is technically sound, but it is not politically feasible, you have to go back to the plan itself and redesign the plan to make it technically sound, but also politically feasible. There might be trade-offs to be made. It could be a road, it could be a power plant, it could be a rail, it could be anything. Then there is the third phase, which they teach again in business school. So you have gone from technical soundness to political feasibility. Now you must go to execution. Is it implementable? Now, implementation will have a lot of elements there. But if it is technically sound, politically feasible, but is not implementable, then you have to go back. Backward loop. You may have to go back several times, until you get to something which is technically sound, politically feasible, and executable. Now, that backward loop is so important that in my humble experience, I find that it is often what is missing. We sit down, design fantastic plans. Maybe PS, you pay big consulting firms, pay them $1 million, they give you nice PowerPoints and plan, or you call the World Bank or IMF or African Development Bank, or the like of me, we design a good plan for you. But it's up to you to go now to test in your parliament, in your municipalities, in your villages, test about political feasibility. Then you have to figure out how can it be executed. Bearing in mind what I said about the context. The policy, institution, resources, governance, the whole of it. And so I think that we would be making perhaps an error of thinking that all we have to do is just do things. No. You have to put them in that context. Once you do that, over years, you learn a lot of useful lessons. Let me just say something I was mentioning to one of your colleagues as I was coming here. You know, public financial management, which is what we are discussing, it's not simply about efficiency. It's not simply about efficiency. It's also about social capital. Because the more you generate confidence in the public that the money is being very well spent, even if you make mistakes, they will understand. The better you'll be able to mobilize more resources, and the better your feedback loop will be important. So it's about efficiency. I'm sure we're going to discuss about this. Avoiding cost overruns, time overruns, stuff like that. But it's about how you build the social capital around what you're spending. And I want to put here that, as you know, all our countries, because of the challenges we face, everything is a priority. So we have got zero-sum budgeting. If you spend more in agriculture, you may spend less in water, you may spend less in infrastructure, you may spend less in defense, stuff like that. So you have to optimize. You have to optimize. You know, sometimes our leaders meet in the summit and they say, look, we must spend 10% on agriculture. Maputo Declaration, I think it's called. 14% on health. 16% on water. But at the end of the day, sums have to add up to 100%. And if they don't add, you have to go back and trade off. So at each juncture, you are trading off. And bearing in mind the interdependence of spending. Just a simple example, which you know very well. So mistakes I used to make myself in my previous functions. Spending on health is not simply about how much money the Minister of Health is getting. there is a very small portion of health spending. It could be that if you look at the interdependence of expenditures, if you look at what social economists call the determinants of health outcomes, it might be that actually in a particular year you have to spend more on water and sanitation than in the health ministry. So it might be that for that particular year, given circumstances of the country, the region, you're most likely to get better health outcomes by increasing expenditure on water, sanitation, nutrition, rural energy, than actually in the Ministry of Health. So we face those challenges. We have always to be aware of them. I don't know about you, PS, but when ministers come to you to say budget discussion, please don't ask them about the input, which is what they're looking for, money. Not even outputs. I've been to so many schools, so many clinics, so many roads. No, it's about outcomes. You could spend more money in education, build a lot of schools, but learning outcomes for the learners actually don't improve year after year. And in one country in West Africa, where I was still president of the FDB, spending on education was, of course, a bit mediocre, but that was not the issue. In 1 year, all kids finishing secondary school failed to reach grades you need to go to university. Now, I'm not saying it is dramatic as that in other countries, but so it is important to focus on how much I've spent, or even the outputs, buildings, individuals, about what has happened. So there is an article I like to refer to. It's published in The Economist, I think it was June 2023. PS, you'll have to look that up. I was very intrigued by the fact that Vietnam, country the size of 100 million people, in 1994, the GDP of Vietnam was about 15 billion, 15 billion. Today, the GDP of Vietnam is $500 billion in a generation. If I'm wrong, check the numbers and tell you. And I've looked carefully at what has happened. There are many factors: location, cross-border investment from the like of Japan, China, Taiwan, Singapore, all of it. But the determinant factor, one of the determinant factors in Vietnam, is what The Economist magazine was referring to. It is entitled, the article, you can look it up. Why are Vietnamese schools so good? Why are Vietnamese schools so good? Look up the article. You can Google it. And they walked through the way their education system works. One of the things they do, they target learning outcomes in such finesse, that The Economist magazine was saying the learning outcomes in Vietnam are better than those of the UK or Canada. In fact, when I traveled to Vietnam, when I was chair of the Global Fund for AIDS, Malaria, and Tuberculosis, I was intrigued by the fact that at a lower level of per capita spend in health, they've done extremely well on COVID outcomes, extremely well. And one of the reasons why their primary health care system is so good, they have a few fancy hospitals, but the primary health care system is brilliant. And they're able to capture a lot of things you need to do. I say this, PS, this is my last point but one, because there is a lot of conversation now in Africa, I'm sure even here in Uganda. Thank you, sir, thank you. Because international donors are now cutting aid flows to Africa. Some people think it's a disaster. Now, two things. Number one, I think taxpayers of rich countries have a choice on how their money should be spent. If in a particular area they choose they want to spend more on armaments and defense, like the Europeans are doing, and not give the like of us in Africa, it is their choice. Europe has now decided they are going to spend on tanks, jet fighters, artillery, and all right. So they have ratcheted up spending up to 5% of GDP. It is a choice they have made, and partly to finance that, they have reduced aid spending. I think, in my view, they are wrong, but I'm not a European. If they are taking the view that we need to spend on someone called Homo sapiens, what is good for all of us together as humans, they might have made another choice. They could have decided to spend more on climate change, on pandemic management, on opportunities of the digital, on opportunities of demography. No, they have chosen to spend money on defense. Okay. But what does it mean for us? Especially because we face what PS described as a triple dilemma. Because the demographics are coming up, the demographic dividend window is very narrow, maybe 40 years. We have a lot of social investment to make in health and education, so the need is a lot. On the other hand, our fiscal space is not growing fast enough. Many of the countries in Africa, including Uganda, you're at what, 15% of tax to GDP ratio, I think. Is that so? Yes, 15%, thereabout. So needs are growing, demographics. Look at urbanization in all our cities. We need more mass transit, right, systems. We need more infrastructure, but the fiscal space is narrow. On the other hand, external inflows are limited because of aid diminishing, and our capacity to incur more debt is limited. So we end up, in what I've called in another statement I was making, in this syndrome I call the aid-debt cycles. We go from cycles of aid-debt. I call it the Pakistani syndrome. We have to break out of that. But how do we do that? We can improve domestic resource mobilization. Of course we can. Tax more rich people, avoid these useless tax holidays, reduce the incentives which don't work and are not needed probably. It's not for me to say, I'm not talking about Uganda. I'm talking generically. So there are many things we can do to raise more revenues. Spend well, of course. For instance, of efficiency and social capital. So, because we face that problem, and I take the example of health, which is the most affected by the recent cuts in foreign aid. So, what I keep saying, please forgive me again, I'm not talking about Uganda, I'm talking about generic. I cannot establish a link between per capita spend on health and health outcomes. Some countries spend a lot of money on health, at least in per capita terms. But the health outcomes are quite poor, as I've just mentioned with COVID. Now, there is a professor at Harvard School of Public Health. You can look up that article. She researched the issue which was happening in China in the early 80s, when China was still poor in the early 80s. And yet, at that point, the health outcomes in China improved dramatically. They had a program they called barefoot doctors. Now, barefoot doctors were not barefoot. They were simply farmers, rice farmers. That's why they called them barefoot. They received 6 months training in basic healthcare, vaccination, looking after people's malaria, stuff like that. And millions of them. And they impacted health dramatically. Now, later as China became wealthier, of course, they moved to more sophisticated systems. Does this say to us that with decline in health financing from outside, should we re-engineer our health sector? Maybe we should. Should we focus more on primary health care prevention, more community health workers, take advantage of technology. In my country now, I live in a small city just outside of Kigali, 2 hours. Blood products and some medicinal products can be delivered by drones. Health workers can provide information through simple technologies. So there might be a way in which you can improve health outcomes by spending less, but spending differently. So rather than saying, well, in fact, XYZ have cut their support of health sector, and therefore the result is dramatic, you could say, fair enough. As they say in the Bible, there were years of plenty, 7 years of plenty, and 7 years of, 7 years of the opposite. All right. But I do believe that in that period, actually there is an opportunity. Opportunity of assessing how well we spend the limited resources we have for maximum outcomes. So that is no longer about the quantum. It's about something different. And I do believe that at this point in Africa, we need to have that conversation, i.e., how do we sustain the achievement of the last 30 years, would make them sustainable at a lower level of quantum of resources. And then I want to end by saying this. This problem, you may think it's just for us in poor countries. I believe the rich countries too have to make the same choices because they have separate type of problems. Because of the demographics, their pension funds under pressure. And have to rethink how they organize their health care, for example. So these are choices all of us have to make. I would have liked us to make them together as Homo sapiens, as human beings. Not as me, European, me, something else, but all of us together. But maybe that option is not available today. So we in Africa then have to say, we have made a lot of progress over the last 6 years. Oh, we have. When people say how well Africa is governed, remember just a number. When colonial powers first came to Africa, statistics were not very good, but life expectancy was around 28 years. 28 years. By the time they left, life expectancy was about 45, right? Around 45. Now today in most African countries, life expectancy is above 60. In my country it is 70 years. That number cannot lie. That number says something has happened in the conditions of living of our people. So our challenge now is we need to sustain that progress. We need to make it more inclusive. We need to make it sustainable with a lower quantum of resources. With a lower quantum of resources. It is, in my view, something we can do and something we should do. So I want to thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to listening to you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Dr. Donald Kaberuka. I know he said he's not a professor and probably does not aim to be one, but I think he just delivered a moving and challenging keynote. Thank you so much, Dr. Donald Kaberuka. And I think for me, among the many things you've said, one of my takeaways is the triangle that you emphasized. And you said a good policy is like a triangle. One, it must be technically sound, it must be politically feasible, and it must be implementable. I think that's a challenge for all of us, whether you're in the public or private sector. Thank you so much, our dear keynote speaker. Our dear chief guest, we've been joined by a series of key guests, partners, that I would like to request to briefly introduce and recognize. And I would like to start with a committee that is very, very central to gatekeeping public investment before admission into the budget, and that is the Development Committee. Members of the Development Committee, I would like to request that you briefly stand up because you play a critical role and you're one of the reasons we're here today. Do we have some of the members? Okay, just wave. You may just wave. Thank you so much. Earlier on, we had Mr. Benon Kigenyi, who is a Deputy ED of KCCA. We've also been joined by the Chief Government Valuer, Mr. Kamundu Gilbert. Thank you, sir, for joining us. And later on, we'll have a set of panelists. Among them will be Mr. Sanjay Rugani, who is the CEO, Stanchat. And I dare add that he's a Rotarian. And I'm also a Rotarian. Clap for that, ladies and gentlemen. Our moderator later will be Dr. Joseph Muvawala, the ED of National Planning Authority. And another panelist will be Engineer Isaac Wani. We'll have time to do detailed introductions, who is a Commissioner of National Roads under the Ministry of Works. We'll also be joined by Engineer Irene Batebe. We have with us the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Education, Dr. Kedres Turiagenda. And also on the panel, I think I had already made that introduction, Dr. Verena Fritz from the World Bank. And a man whose company is changing the skyline of Kampala, Mr. Manish Siyani, the MD of Siyani Brothers and Company. Thank you for joining us. From the civil society, we have Arthur Beinomdsha, the ED Accord. I think I saw him, Dr. Arthur Beinomdsha. And my good friend, Mr. Julius Bakunda from CSBAG. They're always challenging the government. Why haven't you increased the budget of health? But I think the keynote speaker was very clear that sometimes the budget of health might be in other ministries, prevention, those things. So I hope you are noting down, Mr. Mukunda. Edemachu Monica, Undersecretary, Minister of Kampala, Capital City and Metropolitan Affairs. Miss Betty Nansenja, Director, Immigration and Citizenship Control in the Ministry of Internal Affairs. I said Dr. Joseph Muval already. Professor Edward Bale, who is the Principal of College of Business and Management Studies. This is where we are. And a man on whose shoulders the Center of Excellence runs. Thank you so much, Professor Edward. Henry Sebukera, the Technical Advisor to the Budget. Miss Gertrude Aaron Basima, Acting Commissioner, Project Analysis and Public Investment Department, who is also the co-host of this conference. Miss Agnes Kaiser, I think I didn't do you justice earlier. Miss Agnes Kaiser is the Permanent Secretary of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. Thank you so much for joining us. Chief guest, we also have His Excellency Beswale Kezala, Uganda's High Commissioner to Ghana. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for joining us. We also have Barbara Magezi Ndamila, who is a Senior Public Sector Specialist at the World Bank. And in a very special way, the students of Makerere University. Where are you guys? Makerere Oye? Do we have students from Bara University? Okay, they are online, they're watching us online. That's where I went for my university. The manager of the PIM Center of Excellence, Sai, thank you so much for joining us. I'd also like to recognize all lecturers of Makerere University. Thank you so much, and other lecturers of other institutions of higher learning. We've also been joined by the Assistant Commissioner of Prisons, ACGP Munanura Robert, who is also the Director Production and Engineering in Prisons. He's representing the Commissioner General of Prisons. Thank you so much, sir, for coming. And with that, I know that we have so many of you, very important guests. We shall continue to recognize another set of guests later on. I would like now to invite my co-host, Jason, to please come and take us through the next set. Okay. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you very much, Sheila. A big round of applause for her for doing a very, very good job. Another hand clap as she takes her seat. And now, without wasting time, I'd like to invite the Honorable Minister of State for Planning and the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development to deliver his remarks. Thank you very much. A big round of applause as he takes to the floor.
Thank you so much. Our distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Donald Kaberuka, the permanent secretaries in your various capacities, the Chancellor of Makerere University, the Vice Chancellor of Makerere University, our development partners, representatives from the academia and the private sector, to you all the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My presentation was supposed to have been made much earlier than this, but here it comes, and I'm here on behalf of Honorable Matia Kasaija, who, for other state duties, is unable to be here with you, but asked me to stand in for him. And therefore, I make this statement on his behalf. I welcome you to this second Public Investment Management Conference, gathered under the theme, as already indicated, overcoming implementation barriers in public investment management to achieve fiscal sustainability. So I think here the focus is overcoming implementation barriers in the public investment management. This conference is crucial and timely as we start implementation of the National Development Plan 4 and the ED National Planning Authority is here. And this NDP4 is a strategic framework aiming to achieve higher household incomes, full monetization of the economy, and the employment for sustainable socio-economic transformation. I think in that narrative, the word employment is very key. Last week I was in South Africa, and I was confronted with a situation. It was one of the Ugandans who failed to find a job here and went to South Africa in search for greener pastures. Now, he managed to make some breakthrough and bought a very nice car. 2 days later, the thugs, one of them attacking him from the rear and from the front, was hit on the head simultaneously, and he collapsed. So he immediately lost the car. And this is the Ugandan who had gone to South Africa in search for greener pastures. Where he went, the youth there were also looking for jobs. And here they are asking, why come here for jobs when we don't have these jobs that you're talking about? So the issue of employment, therefore, becomes very relevant for the theme that is before us, that as we implement projects under the PIMS policy, the underlying issue is employment creation, because that's one of the biggest challenges as Africa has today. Move from here, go to Ghana, South Africa, the issue of unemployment is very critical. And in this theme, we are talking about household incomes. You cannot talk about household incomes without employment. And then we see these projects, the implementation of projects taking forever. Some of the projects are on a drawing board for more than 6 years. Some take 10 years. And when you include implementation, because this PIMS now includes implementation, 15 years. So when are we going to get these jobs? While these projects are occupying or dominating the fiscal space that would be occupied by new projects. So I think we are discussing a very, very important subject. The issue of the speed of delivery becomes very important if we are to create the jobs that we are talking about. In a special way, allow me to welcome once again Dr. Kaberuka, our keynote speaker, who have just been listening to, the panelists, whom we are just about to hear from, and all of you, the participants, including our partners from the public and private sectors, the academia, civil society, and our international development allies who have traveled from near and far to engage in this crucial discourse. Public investment management is not merely an administrative exercise, but a powerful tool for national and socio-economic transformation. The infrastructure we have, the social services that we continue to fund, and the economic opportunities we unlock through our public investments are the very pillars upon which Uganda's progress rests. The socio-economic transformation we want to achieve is paved with both opportunities and formidable challenges. Over the next 15 years, we'll be implementing the 10-fold growth strategy, which the PS talked about, aiming to increase the country's GDP from 50 billion United States dollars to 500 billion United States dollars by 2040. Now, this ambitious plan seeks to transform Uganda into a high-income economy. And this will be leveraging Uganda's strategic location. We all know Uganda is located at the center of Africa, and transforming this into a high-income economy. And focusing on sustainable and inclusive growth. This aspiration for a better Uganda depends on our ability to manage public investments in a manner that is strategic, efficient, and above all, sustainable. And the keynote speaker talked about, emphasized the issue of outcomes. As a country, we still have several opportunities to tap into and grow our economy beyond the 6%. The youthful population, sometimes we talk about a demographic dividend. The abundant natural resources, some of them underground, still underground and exploited, and the strategic location in Africa, and in particular East Africa, presents us with immense potential. How we plan our investments and implement them will greatly affect how we grow. For example, the investments we have made in transport, energy, health, and education infrastructure have strengthened the backbone of our economy as they continue to attract investors, lower the cost of doing business, and enhance access to public services. However, as our development needs continue to grow, so do the fiscal pressures. Debt levels have risen in response to the demands for accelerated infrastructure and social expenditure amidst constrained revenue growth, which has stagnated at about 13.5% tax to GDP ratio against a target of 16 to 18%. So we have that problem of the resource gap the presenter was talking about. So our mandate, therefore, is very clear. We must continue to invest in Uganda's future, but we must do so prudently, ensuring that every shilling yields meaningful and lasting returns. We must therefore resolve some of these challenges. Delays in project execution is one of those challenges. Cost overruns, inadequate prioritization, weak monitoring and evaluation frameworks, and limited capacity have all hampered our public investments. I think the elephant in the room here are the delays in project execution. I mentioned that some of them take 10 years, and really we cannot afford that at all. So we have to do something, and I hope this conference will discuss this issue of delays in project execution. Most, if you look at the externally funded projects, most of these are suffering this problem very severely, and we really need to do something about it. So our commitment is to address these barriers head-on, learning from both international best practices and our own experiences. The ministry is committed to deepening the integration of medium-term expenditure frameworks, strengthening revenue mobilization, and rationalizing expenditures to focus on core priorities. We are exploring innovative financing instruments, including concessional borrowing, which is increasingly becoming scarce, blended finance, and the mobilization of domestic savings to support our investment agenda without compromising the fiscal discipline. However, these development challenges demand a whole-of-society approach. I wish to acknowledge the pivotal role played by our development partners, the private sector, the civil society, the academia, in advancing the public investment agenda. I encourage all stakeholders to continue lending their expertise, the resources and perspectives, as together we strive to develop solutions tailored to Uganda's context. Let us nurture the spirit of mutual trust, transparency, and shared responsibility. These are the foundations upon which sustainable development and fiscal resilience are built. As we look to the future, it is imperative to invest in the skills and capabilities of our people. The ministry is working closely with Makerere University and establishing the Public Investment Management Center of Excellence to skill government officials, conduct research, and promote innovation in public investment management. And I think talking about research, we need to interrogate this issue of delays in project implementation very seriously. While interviewing some project implementers, we discovered some projects fail to move simply because of laziness. One gets confronted with a small challenge, and he celebrates that challenge, that he has got time off, to implement the project. So the project stagnates because of a simple challenge. We looked at some of what they are calling challenges. They were actually not challenges at all. Lack of interest, the attitude of some of these project implementers, the political affiliation. So we need research in all these things. They say that civil servants they are not involved in politics. But some of the civil servants, yes, they have not pronounced themselves where they fall, but they belong somewhere. Some of them are yellow, some are green, some are red. You know, and someone just simply sits there to frustrate project implementation, depending on the color to which he belongs. So all this has to be researched on. Projects don't delay because of various big problems. They delay because of some of these political, sociological issues. And I think in this research department, you need to interrogate some of these issues. So I want to appreciate Makerere University PIMS Center of Excellence for continuing to offer capacity building in the public investment management. And I think they deserve a round of applause for that. I wish to also implore you to harness the potential of technology, the adoption of digital tools for project monitoring, real-time reporting, so that we get the information fast enough, and data analytics that will enable faster, evidence-driven decisions and strengthen accountability at all levels. Cabinet set up a cabinet subcommittee on some of these projects, and I think these tools will be very useful in terms of real-time reporting, because that subcommittee is required to report on a half-year basis. And to be able to do that, these reporting mechanisms must be in place and fully facilitated. So I call upon all ministries, departments, and agencies to recommit themselves to the principles of good governance, transparency, and results-oriented management. Let us set clear targets, monitor progress rigorously, and hold ourselves accountable for delivering on our promises to the people of Uganda. Let us continue to learn from our experiences, adapt to changing circumstances, and remain steadfast in our pursuit of a prosperous Uganda. The discussions and recommendations that will emerge from this conference will inform policies and actions that touch every corner of our nation, impacting lives today and shaping destinies tomorrow. As I conclude, I want to thank all of you for your attention, your dedication, and your partnership. May our deliberations be fruitful and our resolve unwavering as we work together to solve the challenges before us. It is now my singular honor to declare the second Public Investment Management Conference officially open. May God bless you all, and may God bless the Republic of Uganda. Thank you so much.
Big round of applause for the Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, I'd like to request that you stay. We want to have a photo moment with a few dignitaries, and then we can allow you to break for yes, please. So I'd like to invite all the permanent secretaries, directors, heads of institutions, commissioners of government, development partners, heads of civil society organizations, plus our keynote to come, and we have a photo moment. We could phase it, we could have it in 3 phases. We can have the PSS first with the keynote. The camera people, please do us the honors, and let's do this expeditiously. So permanent secretaries, under secretaries, please come first. Commissioners, do we have any commissioners in here? They are coming. And development partners, please come quickly, and then yes, Director, you can also stay for this picture. Gertrude, please join this picture. Madam Gertrude. MDs of companies. Mr. Sayani, please join this picture. Development partners. Or if you're representing one of those, please join this picture. Okay. Some can be in the back. The MD of Stanchart, oh, he's okay. That's it. So please proceed to the, I've been advised that you should please proceed to the exhibition area, and then you proceed to coffee. So, Honorable Minister and keynote, this Honorable Minister,
a further downgrade.
The chairperson of the commission would like to have a picture with you as well. From down here, with the keynote speaker. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite the first 4 rows to go for break tea. And then the Makerere students, we have allocated an area for break tea. It's in the annex building of the business block. So kindly rush there now. Tea budget, we missed you in this picture. So the first 4 rows, please proceed to coffee. Okay, let's all just break for coffee now. When we return, we will receive our panel and then proceed with the rest of the program. We also have the exhibition area in case you'd like to.
Director in charge of debt and cash policy at the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic.
You're watching Rest TV, Wumula.
Welcome to the program, Kingdom Life. My name is